David, can you start by explaining what this book's about?
Well, I wrote the book because I've been involved in quite a few disasters myself over the years. And it's very easy to remember the fact that a disaster has occurred. I mean, everybody will remember that the Titanic sank. But the lessons that should be learnt are often quite quickly forgotten. And it struck me that we needed, in the health and safety profession, to reinforce our collective understanding of the reasons why some of these things have happened, so that we can avoid them happening again. That was basically the idea. I believe that health and safety professionals are a very important profession, particularly today, but they have to have a dialogue with directors at board level of companies, with safety representatives, and a lot of those people, directors of boards in particular, reach their level of responsibility with no previous experience necessarily of managing an operation safely. They wouldn't understand perhaps how necessary it is to have competent staff, which means training and so on. So the idea really is to try and pitch this book in a way which is not too technical, but can be readily absorbed by a range of people. But hopefully safety professionals in particular will look at it and think, yes, that will be helpful to me, because there are quite a lot of references, if they're interested in following up a particular incident, quite a lot of references to help them do that. And I hope that directors will also find it interesting and think to themselves, there, but for the grace of God goes my company, and I must take some steps to make sure that can't happen.
Can you give me an example of the range of disasters covered in this book?
Well, I start off with one that occurred when I was very young in the Medway towns, where some cadets were marching in the dark down to Chatham Dockyard for a boxing tournament. And they were mown down by a bus, an ordinary public service bus, coming along in the dark. It was badly lit, the street. The cadets were marching on the side of the road that the bus was coming along. It wasn't coming towards them, it was coming up from behind. They had no lights. The bus had no headlights on, it was just travelling on side lights. And that was a terrible catastrophe, and it made a huge impression on all of us, young people at the time. I've never forgotten that. So I start there, and I talk about the Aberfan disaster, which was, you'll recall, the slide down a mountainside of an unstable tip from a coal mine, which completely engulfed a local infant school, killed many, many young children and some teachers. And no law applied. There was no, at the time, no sort of regulation that required these tips to be inspected regularly so they could be kept stable. And there are other mining disasters I refer to which taught us a lot about the control of gas explosions and of dust explosions, which are relevant right across industry. I've talked about crowd disasters, the Bethnal Green tube disaster during the war when the station was being used as an air raid shelter, and a lot of people were panicked into rushing down the steps. One or two people tripped, and over 100 people lost their lives, I seem to recall. And I've also talked about disasters abroad of that kind, like at the Hajj in Mecca, when almost every year until recently, huge numbers of people have lost their lives in stampedes. So there's a lot that can be learnt from all of these. I've talked about public health disasters, animal health, foot and mouth disease, for example. I mean, no individual human being was harmed, but the economic consequences were enormous. And the methods for controlling that kind of disaster are very applicable to looking after human health and safety as well. So the book has got quite a wide range, as you can see. I've talked about rail, I've talked about air, marine disasters, environmental pollution. You name it, I think you'll find it there somewhere.